Brian, I think you're breathing into the mic. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Boris Effects virtual NAB live stream. Today, we're going to be looking at Mocha Pro with Mary Poplin. We're going to be looking at the new improvements in Mocha Pro 2020.5. Say hello, Mary. You are on mute.
I saw that.
There
Hi.
you go.
I also didn't want to be breathing into the mic. Hi, guys. I'm Mary Poplin. I am a senior product specialist at Boris Effects, and I'm going to be showing you some Mocha Pro today.
Cool. Thank you, Mary. And Ross Shane is joining us as well. Say hello, Ross.
Hey, guys. Great to see you both. thanks for everyone for tuning with us during these times. Really appreciate all your time.
So today we are continuing our virtual NAB live stream. We're going to be looking at Mocha Pro. Mary's going to take us. Mary is Mocha Queen. She's going to be taking us through planar tracking with Mocha Pro and the new improvements in 2020.5. We're going to be giving away some amazing prizes as well. So everyone go ahead and like, subscribe, or share. That's the way to enter to win any of our prizes we're giving away. Let me look and see what we're going to be giving away at this stream. We have some amazing prizes from our super generous partners and sponsors. We're going to be giving away an online class to Future Media Concepts, a license for Vegas Pro, a 1-year subscription to Avid Media Composer, a 1-year subscription to the Boris Effects Bundle, 1-year subscription to Silhouette Paint, 1-year subscription to Silhouette. We're going to be giving away a license for Isotope RX7, amazing audio plugins. And we're going to be giving away the Core Melt Chromatic and Paint X bundle. So go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. As my friend Ben Brownlee says, smash that like button nonstop and subscribe or share. That's the way to enter to win. We are streaming on a whole bunch of different platforms right now. So we're on a couple different YouTube channels and a couple different Facebook channels as well. So if you're in any of those live streams, we'll just be picking randomly all around, and we'll be announcing the winners at the end of the presentation. Also, the NAB sale is happening right now. That is 50% off new perpetual multi-product bundles. So Sapphire and Mocha, Continuum and Sapphire, any combination of our products, those multi-product bundles, those are 50% off and 25% off everything else. So if you want to upgrade to what Mary's going to show you today, if you want to upgrade to the latest Mocha Pro, that is 25% off. It's 25% off subscriptions, new licenses, and renewals for all our products. So without further ado, I will present to you the esteemed Mary Poplin. I'm going to hand it over to you, Mary.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see what we're looking at. And I'm going to go over some of what Mocha is with Ross Shane here. So let's go ahead and hit share. And all right, so let's talk a little bit about what Mocha is used for. So Mocha is a planar tracker, right? And we get used for visual effects all over the world in just about every production. And we're a planar tracker, which is different than a point tracker and feature tracker. It means we actually track textures. And we actually use those textures and that tracking data to create all sorts of visual effects. One of those things is rotoscoping. One of those is match moving. And some of that is 3D camera solving. And those are all cornerstone pieces to the visual effects tool set. And I'm going to let Ross chime in too.
Yeah, Mary's showing some of the shots that we used actually when we won the Emmy Award this past fall. You saw some, just sort of a compilation of different kinds of projects. Mocha's been used on tons of feature films. You saw some Harry Potter in there, lots of TV shows. We were lucky enough to get some clips from Stranger Things. This one clip here is a clip from, what was it called? No, I'm spacing on that show.
I can't remember.
Yeah, but it's been used on many, famous films and TV shows for tracking, for Roto, for set extensions.
Yeah, for matte paintings and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, and Mocha is used, Mocha Pro is used to support After Effects and Nuke and Flame, products like that. For those that, a lot of people know us through Adobe Creative Cloud, where Mocha AE is bundled free with every After Effects. So that's always that's a good starting point for a lot of users.
Well, yeah, and the nice thing, sorry, Brian.
I was going to say that first of all, these clips never get old for me. I love watching them, but that green book head replacement, man, that really blows me away every time I see it.
Yeah, that was done by a company called Pixel Magic. That they basically tracked and used a stunt piano player to replace the body and replace the actor's head on top of a stunt piano player on almost every shot. Very, very cool stuff.
Amazing.
We have a tutorial on how to do that on our website that I did for Halloween a couple of years ago.
Oh, you're a headless horseman one.
Yeah, it's pretty goofy and low budget, but you know what? It is it's a breakdown of the technique, which is basically stabilizing the head and then replacing it. What we're really known for, though, as you can see in this, is screen inserts. That's kind of the bread and butter of Mocha. And the nice thing about screen inserts is when people when people do screen inserts, and I'll show a little bit of this. People do screen inserts. One of the things they always tend to make a mistake on is they'll put tracking markers all over their shiny screen. And all that does is create extra paint work for you. But because Mocha's a planar tracker, if you draw around the edge of the screen, you actually end up getting a much better track, and you don't have to do the paint work. So I'm not going to talk too much more about this. I'm going to dive in and show you, or rather than tell you, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the new features, and then I'm going to go through these shots and show you. So Boris FX Mocha is an award-winning tool. We actually won an Academy Award and an Emmy, which, not to brag or anything, but I'm gonna. Some of the new features we have we have made improvements to the area brush, the magnetic spline and edge snapping tools. We added mega plates. We have Autodesk Flame support. We have OCIO color management, which is going to be important for those of you working in a studio pipeline. And we also added After Effects power pins this year. Now, the improvements in 2020.5 are improved planar tracking. So for those of you that have been used Mocha in the past, you ever notice when you get too close to the front of the screen how Mocha folds in on itself because the planar tracking data can't recognize negative values? Our wonderful engineers have fixed that, so thank you, team. And that's now we can track all sorts of shots that we weren't able to track as well as pretty much Mocha tracks everything else. So we now have faster renders for our motion blur rendering. We have made improvements to our area brush and edge snapping tools, which means we added this thing called gap fill and multi-snap. So you can now take multiple points and snap them, and you can just color around something to grab a shape really quickly. And I'm going to show you that. We have improved our media support. We now have a GStreamer media engine. We also have a Gmask tracer export, and it allows you to export roto shapes and axis data into Flame. And of course, I mentioned OCIO color.
Hey, Mary, can we hang on the slide for 1 second?
Of course we can.
Yeah, I just want to kind of touch on a couple of these things. Number one is excited to share with you guys that this 2020.5 release is actually live on our website today. So it's a major point release for all owners of 2020. So you can just download it free. Anyone who's using the Mocha standalone application, and Mary and I love to use the plugin ourselves, but there's a lot of users out there that still really appreciate to run Mocha as a standalone. That GStreamer media engine point, that means that you're going to be able to open up a lot more different types of video files than we used to. In the past, if you've ever opened up a video file in Mocha and saw a black screen, right? This is going to fix some of those issues.
Right, because Mocha, the standalone, used to be dependent on the QuickTime engine, and now it's not.
That's right. Cool.
All right, wonderful. So I want to show you really quick the Gmask tracer export. So what it does is it basically gives you a one-to-one export from Mocha to Flame. So if you use Bezier's, it's going to be one-to-one. If you use Splines, you're going to have a couple more points in here, but you will have your tracking data and your mask data separate. So if you need to make roto corrections, you can do that right in your host. And that's been a really sought-after export that Flame users have asked us for. And then as far as some of the really exciting announcements we have, Ross mentioned that we have released today, and then Silhouette Paint released yesterday, and we actually bundled those together for a really powerful paint and roto package together, and it's a plugin set that you can use inside of any host. Well, just about any host. Well, you can find out what exactly hosts on our website. All right, so if you want any more information, go to borisfx.com, and I'm going to jump into shots and stop telling and start showing. Okay, so we talked a little bit about our tracking improvements, so let's show you that. And we'll talk a little bit about planar tracking and what planar tracking is. So for those of you that have never touched Mocha before, Mocha is a planar tracker. And what does that mean? It sounds like a buzzword. What planar tracking means is that we track a pattern of pixels as they move relative to one another through the scene. Okay, and that sounds like programmer speak. So think about it as a texture tracker, and as long as that texture is moving in one direction, we can track it. Now, here's where it gets tricky. If I want to track this hand and it's doing this, this is 2 planes of motion that I need to track. Really, it's 3 because it's here, here, and here. So think about splitting your objects up into what we would call marionette style shapes, or think of it in terms of low poly models. When you think about a face, for example, faces are not round at all. but people think they are. But this is a plane, this is a plane, this is a plane, and they're all at separate angles to one another. So let's talk about how this works. So in order to get a planar track, what you have to do is you have to draw a shape, and this shape will be where Mocha looks for the track. And we're just going to go ahead and draw this out. Now, another thing that I like to do when I am tracking, and for those of you that have seen my tutorials before, we're always going to take our surface tool and we're going to align our surface tool to the plane that we're trying to track. And here's why. Because I can turn this lovely grid tool on and we can really align this to the plane. Once we have aligned this to the plane, we can visually see what our track is going to look like. So we track 5 different parameters, and here's the cool thing about it. This is where the track is looking, this little white square here. Let me make it red so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, this is where the track is looking, and the surface tool, the little blue square, is what the track is doing. We track 5 different parameters, which is translation, skew, rotation, shear, and perspective. And what's cool about that is, let me go ahead and hit track backwards, and I'll put the surface tool way up here in the front. I'm going to show you our new tracking improvements. You see how the surface tool is up here in the front? We're going to hit track backwards. Now that surface tool is going to go completely off screen into Z space forward. And what that's going to do is that's not going to meat cake in on itself. So for those of you that have used Mocha in the past, you may have noticed sometimes your shape would flip because the surface tool would go behind the camera. Now that problem has been solved. So if you need to start laying down real estate lines for drone videos or any sorts of challenging shots that in the past were just a little too challenging, we now have the ability to fix that for you. So we're really excited about that announcement.
Hey, Mary, while that's
yeah.
going, I thought it'd be fun just to take a couple quick questions that are related to when you show the grid. Someone was asking if you can change the grid size. I thought it would be interesting to show just the grid preferences, which is just like there's so many things that not everyone, that you might not catch on your first use of Mocha.
Yeah. So let's go to our, actually, where are the grid preferences?
Under view preferences.
Right.
On the right. Yeah. You got to show.
That's going to be, where are my grid preferences?
Upper right-hand corner of your interface, all the way to the right, your view preferences.
This is my view preferences.
No, to the right above your viewer. All the way to the right, top right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Like these. Right. So your grid dividers. So you can increase your grid dividers here and here. Sorry, I lost them. I feel like we must have moved them, or I just forgot.
That's cool. Yeah, if you have to show the grid to make.
Yeah. So here's your grid. Let's go ahead and turn that back on. Let's go ahead and close this. And now our grid has much more.
Cool. Thanks a lot for helping answer that question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you know what? That's literally the first time I've ever got that question. So good question.
Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a lot there under the hood.
There is. Would you believe I've been using this software for 10 years and there's still stuff I don't know about it? Like just because it's, it's just incredibly dense for those of you that want it. Okay, so you can see that actually gives you a really good view of what your track is doing. Another trick I want to show you, if we're talking about grids really fast, is if that's not visual enough for you, if you need like a more visual clip, you can actually use an insert clip right here. And the nice thing about this is if you're doing like a screen insert or something like that, this can show you right away whether or not your object that you're inserting is going to fit properly onto your surface tool. So it's a little bit different.
You could even channel that where you just showed that insert clip. If you're using it in the plugin, you could even channel like another layer from After Effects or a different source if you wanted to.
Yep, that's the insert layer one. And you can always do that in the host. But if you're in the standalone, you'd have to import it. So sometimes it's just really quick to get that 32 by 32 grid. So, as anything in Mocha, there's like just 1,000 ways to do something. So it's just going to depend on your preferences. All right, so I'm going to move on talking about tracking. I do want to mention just a couple of things really quick about tracking for those of you that are new to Mocha. Okay, so translation, we track 5 different things. Translation is the movement in X and Y, so that's really obvious, okay? Scale, also pretty obvious, like, okay, we understand that. Okay, rotation, super obvious, we all know what that does. But shear and perspective, what does that do? So shear is just the movement in X and Y here. Okay, it's just a warp in X and Y. So if you're doing like a squib or like tracking somebody's shirt, this is a good example to use. If you have a person turning their head away from you or a door opening, you want to use perspective, and that's the addition of Z space to that warp, okay? So that's the difference between shear and perspective. You only want to use the parameters that you need to use, and you don't want to tell Mocha to use stuff that's not happening. So for example, if you have something that's not moving in Z space, go ahead and turn perspective off, because Mocha's a computer. It does exactly what you tell it to. Sometimes, you tell it to do the wrong thing. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to some of our Roto tools. And while we're loading that up, are there any questions, Ross, that I can answer?
No, I think people are pretty excited to see what you're showing. I don't know if you maybe it would be nice just to show how you get that track, like create the track data for people who haven't really seen the plugin.
Sure. I'll show that right here in this shot really
Okay,
quick.
great.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the area brush. So for those of you that don't know our new Roto tools, I'm going to show those to you. Let's go ahead and delete this really quick. All right, so we have this new tool, and so we have our area brush. And one of the nice things about the area, I'm sorry, that's the magnetic spline tool, area brush right here. So one of the nice things about the area brush tool is we now have this new thing called fill gaps, and we can do some interesting things here. We can either use open or close brackets to make these larger or smaller, or we can click Control and we can make our brush larger or smaller. Now, the cool thing about this is if I want to just, for instance, color correct this, I can just take, and this is pressure sensitive, I can just take my little shape here. And now when we hit quick mask, Mocha will fill that together based on our closed gaps, because you saw how there were gaps in there and now they're not. In the past, it would just keep all of those. So we want to actually use fill gaps instead. So let's go ahead and delete that. All right, and delete that. And let's talk about some of the other tools we have. We have here this tool called the magnetic spline tool. I'm going to show you the difference between that and the X-splines. We have X-splines and Beziers right here. Here's the thing about X-splines. I can come in here and I can try to follow the edge, but following the edge takes time. So I'm probably just going to make a big sloppy shape around this, okay, and call that a day. But what I can actually do is I can use the magnetic spline tool, and I can ask Mocha to trace this object for me just as long as I'm coming up along the edge like this. And what's nice about this is it gives me a really articulated roto without me having to do just a ton of work. And we'll just come in here. So what's interesting about this is that I can take this spline, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete some of this mess of points down here that I made. Doop. I can take this spline and I can take my detail down, or I can leave it how it is. The other thing about this is we have this tool called the freehand tool right here, and you can just use it to draw a shape really quickly. Now, what's nice about that is that we can use this freehand tool as part of the magnetic spline tool by either letting the magnetic spline tool find what it can, or I can click down, and as I'm using my magnetic spline tool, I can draw if I feel like it loses the edge. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of.
I love that. I love that you can use the freehand tool and go off the edge of the screen. That's one of my favorite things.
It's super nice. So when you're doing all these, when you're trying edge snapping, you wouldn't want to just come up here along the edge. And that's actually like a limitation of, I've used programs like Photoshop for a long time, and when you ever use that magnetic tool, it always wants to stay along the edge of something. And then you have to use the lasso tool to go around. What's nice about this is that's just built into the workflow. So let's talk a little bit about actual rotoscoping, and I'm going to show you edge snapping. And I meant to show you exports, but we'll do that in our roto. That's fine. Let's go to
the other thing, Mary, that someone was asking about, which maybe we can just cover really quickly, is just how to take a spline and make it into an open spline.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so if we come over here, all we need to do is click on our spline, and then we'll right click. In theory.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I'm just going to answer a couple of questions. Some people are asking about, how many points are on the spline? Does that relate to the better tracking? And really, that's the points on the spline. Think of the spline as just the search area, and the tracking is tracking all the pixels within that search area. So Mocha doesn't really care about how many points are on your spline, but you as the artist are going to care when you get into rotoscoping.
Yes, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So if you want to open a spline, you right click and you go to Open Spline. Okay, so it's a drop down menu. It'll just pop up in the middle of your screen, Spline and Open Spline. All right, and let's talk about tracking and exporting for Roto. Okay, so with this shot, what this shot is this shot is a shot I'm going to use to make a depth mat with. I used to do a lot of stereo conversion, for those of you that don't know. Stereo conversion requires you to roto everything and then make a depth mat, and then you project that, you make that depth mat into like a 3D object, you project the textures on top of it, and you can put two cameras right and left eye. That's one technique. There's 1,000 techniques to convert things into stereo. But the gist is that you need a depth mat, and a lot of times you don't have one, so you have to create one by hand. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to track every piece of this guy. And you can see that I've tracked this in pieces. You see it's cut up marionette style. And the reason for that is that you can see this arm is straight, okay, but this other arm is bending. All right, so you notice I have one shape here and two shapes here. If this guy were bending his arm, I would do two shapes, but I'm not. But since this guy's bending his arm here, these are two different sets of planar data. So I use that bottom track to fill in his arm on the bottom and the top track on the top. Now, here's how Mocha works. Let's go in here and track this head from scratch. So we have this flare here, and you can see, I'm just going to show you this really quick. We have this flare that I sort of rotoscoped and tracked in our shot, and I'm going to put that at the top of the layer pile, because one of the things that Mocha does is Mocha treats everything at the top of the layer pile as closest to camera, and every subsequent object lower in the layer pile, Mocha will treat like further from the camera, which means that if you stack, this is user defined, so if you stack foreground objects at the top of the layer pile and roto everything behind them in successive layers, what you'll always have is you'll always have holdout mats for everything that you're tracking. So because this flare goes over my guy, and it's huge, even though it doesn't look huge, it is huge because there's a lot of light fall off. You can see here, and here. The thing about Mocha is Mocha's a planar tracker. It looks at texture. It's going to interpret all of that as texture, and it's going to throw my track off. So we want to isolate that, and then Mocha will hold that out from the rest of our tracks. Now, if I want to start tracking this head, for example, what I'm going to use is I'm going to take my magnetic spline tool, and I'm going to just come in here and draw a nice magnetic shape right around my hoodie. When I get to the shoulders, I'm going to click and draw down, and then right click to close. Okay. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to select all of it. I'm going to go down to my detail layer. I'm going to take my details down. Okay. And now I'm going to soften this, and we're going to go ahead and start tracking. But what I want to show you is how we're going to track this roto. So I told you we track 5 different parameters. With rotoscoping, if you're rotoing organic objects, don't use perspective. It's just going to get too wonky. Okay, it'll give you too much tracking data, and there is such a thing when you're doing rotoscoping. If you're tracking rigid bodies, go ahead and use perspective. But organic bodies like people, animals, plants that are moving in the wind, that kind of thing, go ahead and use shear. Now we're going to hit track backwards. All right, and what I want you to see here is that Mocha is looking at this texture and then giving me this tracking data based on that texture. I want to show you one more thing about this. Look, we're going to move this over here. All right, and keep tracking.
Yeah, very cool. Showing the relationship between the search area and the surface, which is your tracking data.
Exactly. So this is where Mocha is looking. This is what the track is doing. And it's completely independent. So you see how that did not animate? It's just wherever I move that tracking data. Okay, that's where the tracking data is, because the surface tool, think of the surface tool as your translation tool. That puts the math that Mocha is doing into a visual representation, and you can move that visual representation anywhere. What this is your corner pin export and your transform export here in the middle. And you can export your tracking data here into whatever you would like, including the new After Effects Power Pen. CC PowerPen export. But
Hey,
you
Mary.
can see that, yes.
I'm sorry, if that's a convenient time to. Someone's asking, since we're talking about different tracking techniques, can you explain a little bit about the minimum amount of pixels you use selection down there?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm interested in this. I'm always wondering this as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
crank it up.
I'm gonna take notes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what we call basically your accuracy, right? Your minimum percent of pixels used. What that means is right now it's set, you see how it's a percentage, right? So right now it's set at 50. So that means that 50% of the pixels inside of this, once Mocha finds 50% of the pixels on one frame, it's going to go ahead and jump to the next frame. If you crank this value up to 100, Mocha is going to look for 100% of that data before it says, okay, I can move on to the next frame. But here's the thing about that. The higher this number is, the slower Mocha's tracking is going to be. And like, look, Mocha's tracker is fast. I'm not going to lie. But here's the thing. When you're tracking large areas, you kind of want to make this number lower. If you're tracking little tiny areas, you want to make this number as high as possible. Okay. Now, even though this accuracy is set really, really high, this is where the track is looking. This is what the track is doing. You can see that it's not following the edge. That's because we don't have edge snapping built into the tracker. But what we do is we allow you to correct for that edge snapping over time. So what you need to think about in Mocha is that Mocha is your roto assistant, okay? And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. All of the blue data in this line when it's done tracking is going to be the tracking data that Mocha has created. So that's how it's your roto assistant. It creates tracking data so that you can correct it over time. And then we use, as artists, we use the principles of animation, which is to say animating in the arcs of the animation. You know, think of your traditional squash and stretch animations. And we look for the arcs of the movement, which is to say we look for where the object is the most different from its original starting point. So here is our original starting point. I'm going to go ahead and center this into the screen. I'm going to show you one more cool tool here, which is this tool called the quick stabilize mode. What that's going to do is that's going to pin your shape into the middle of your screen based on your track. For those of you that were watching Ben's silhouette tutorial, this is a similar technique. You don't have to create a node or anything. It just pins it in the center of the screen so that you can rotoscope more accurately. But here's the thing. Notice how we're looking for where this is the most different. So here's where the object is the most different. I'm going to take my my point selection tool and I'm going to grab around my my points here. I'm going to get this a little bit closer and I'm going to hit Alt S, and Alt S will snap that to my edges now. We're going to move this here, and I'm going to just grab these points here, and I'm going to hit Alt S, and then I'm going to grab these points here and Alt S, and Alt S. Up, undo. Well, here, let's come over here. So it's looking for edges, and because it's pretty sensitive, sometimes Mocha will think edges are things like, you know, parts of this cloud. All right, so that is now my snapped edge. And what's nice about this is I didn't have to move that by hand. So now I'm going to look for any other errors, and we're going to select our points again, and we're going to hit Alt S. And what that'll do is that'll snap to those edges again. So what's nice about this is really quickly I can start to correct my keyframes. And you can see here is the work that Mocha has done for me itself in blue, and then the green dots are my keyframes that I have made to correct for that shape. So what we end up with, as we turn our little stabilize off, is roto that moves nice and smoothly in our shot based on the track. And what's cool about using the tracking data is that it really hides a lot of your sins by, even if your roto isn't 100% accurate, it's not pixel perfect, because it's moving along with the object really naturally according to the motion, you end up getting some pretty natural rotos. So let me turn this back on, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that.
Yeah, I'm going to point out that edge snapping, that is a Mocha Pro feature, not a Mocha AE, but that is also something that's been recently updated. In fact, the release just came out today, for which you can do what Mary was just doing and select multi-points at the same time for the edge snapping.
Exactly. So here's my finished roto. I want to show you really quickly on this headpiece. You can see that all of this blue is what Mocha did, and all of the green are my keyframes. So you can see that Mocha saved me a lot of work. when you rotoscope in Mocha, you roto in about half the time and use about a third of the keyframes that you can use. And I stand by those numbers. Like I said, I used to do stereo conversion, and the reason I started using Mocha in the first place is because I had a friend that saw me struggling with a roto shot that was boats shot from another boat, and he's like, "Why aren't you using Mocha for this?" I was like, "I don't know. Like, why don't you show me?" And so he sat down and showed me, and I was like, "Oh, I'd been rotoing for a day and a half. He finished rotoing my shot in 15 minutes, and I wanted to cry."
Yeah, we hear these stories so much, Mary, right? When we go on site and people, they've heard of Mocha, but they've never really jumped into it, or else they might use it just for tracking and they don't even think to use it for roto, but it's such a huge time saver. I want to make one point about the shot that you're showing, actually, because I know there's a lot of Adobe After Effects users here who might sort of say, well, I like to use the Roto brush for this kind of shot. The Roto brush is a great, great tool, but if you notice the way the technique that Mary used, where she broke up this person into marionette style, you really can't do that with the Roto brush, and you can't have the kind of finesse and control over keyframing that Mary is doing here. So personally, that's I think the Roto brush is fantastic for some quick tasks, but to have the power that you need to do articulate roto, we really recommend these kind of techniques.
Yeah, so look, don't get me wrong. The Roto tool is an excellent tool. And here's what I think the Roto brush tool is great for. I think it's great for background objects and midground objects. I really don't think it's good for hero objects in your shot. And it certainly isn't good when you have this much interference over here. The reason that we were able to track this arm is because we actually track the arm over here, and then we extend that track down the arm in order to get our roto. And here's why that works. Okay, when you are rotoing, when you're using planar tracking, all right, let's say my hand is the plane. These pixels are always going to be moving faster than these and faster than these and faster than these. That relationship between those pixels, that math is going to be constant because it's a plane. So for those of you that are into geometry, right, that plane is always going to be moving the same, and the math data between those points is always the difference is always going to be the same. Okay, so when you're tracking something and you have an occlusion here, you can track back here on the plane and you can still get all of the data. So for this arm, we tracked back here and avoided most of the smoke mess. And that's really, really important when you're doing complex visual effects, which this is. You can take this shape data, and out of Mocha Pro, you can export it in a copy and paste mode to whatever host you like, including Fusion, Gmasks. Obviously, we have After Effects. We do the old Final Cut, not the new Final Cut. Okay, and we do the Flame Tracer, and we do exports for hit film and does Premiere support the shapes again, or did it stop?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And Premiere now supports the shapes again. So let's go ahead and hit cancel there. And we can copy and paste that, or we can actually apply it in the plugin. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close.
I think people would actually love to see just how you would apply it in the plugin. Great.
Hey, one thing I know flame artists across the world are singing with joy at GMAS Tracer support. So I mean I can't tell you how many times I've heard that request. So that's an amazing new feature in 2020.5.
Yeah, I'm really stoked about it. So let's go over here to our mats, and I'll just show you all of this stuff. So in our plugin interface, I know we had mentioned that you can do an insert layer. So if I wanted to insert something into the shot, I can select any of my layers and use that as my insert layer. So that means I can apply it from my host into my plugin. But let's talk about Roto. If I want to apply this Roto, I can come over here to my mat section. I can either view my mat or apply my mat. Right? And apply will apply it like a plugin, so it'll just be a black and white mask. Or I can come and, oh, by the way, that supports motion blur, and I'll show you the motion blur thing here in a second. So we can feather our mask when we apply it, or we can go to create AE masks, and that will actually create native After Effects splines right here in our plugin. It takes a second for it to do because it's copying and pasting all the data over, and then it will apply those masks to your shot. The nice thing about this is that when you do that, those native AE masks are much faster than anything else that is happening inside of the plugin. And there we go. So you can see there's my masks applied to my shot, just like that. So I'm going to undo that because I actually have all of those roto shapes right here on a mask. And what I'm using is I'm actually using those roto shapes to create a very rudimentary, and I mean rudimentary. This is not a good depth mat. It's just a basic depth mat because I'm trying to apply more fog to this shot. And what you can actually use a depth mat kind of like this, I think in Sapphire now, can't you, Brian?
Yeah, ZMAT, the
Yep.
Z depth could take advantage of this.
Exactly, which was kind of what I was thinking when I was making this.
I'm
So
over
anyway,
here.
there's
I'm over here talking on mute, like alone. Yeah, totally. Ross nailed it. Yep, you can use it with any of the Z effects, like Z blur or Z fog or Z to focus.
exactly. So so now we have this lovely fog that we can add back to our shot. Let's go back to our shot here over on there we go. And what we've done is I've just used this as a quick and dirty mask over a BCC. Actually, we use particle illusion for this to get some fog. And I'm just using this as a mask to mask the fog back in. And what we have is a much more foggy shot using that roto now. And it looks like he's moving through the fog rather than just sitting on top of it, which is important. Okay. Because you don't want the level of fog happening on the background happening on our foreground object. All right. So that's just a really basic example of the kind of stuff you can do with roto. Obviously, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with roto. Motion blur masking. All right. So we actually have, I'm just going to come in here. Inside of Mocha, we've always had this lovely motion blur option that I don't know that everybody knows about. It will not export to native splines, but what it will do is it will create motion blur based off your roto shapes right here in Mocha. And then you can use these roto shapes inside of the plugin. So all we do is we hit apply matte. All right. And now it's actually 4 times faster. So if we're rendering this in real time here in After Effects, there's our motion blur right over our background. All right.
Yeah, for this release, we really tried to focus on just improving the software overall. So, it's a point release, but it is pretty major. Lots of great features that will just sort of improve day-to-day use of Mocha. And really tried to
Exactly.
address, some of the feature requests that people have been asking us for.
Yes. So it's a pretty amazing tool. And I do want to show a little bit about mega plates. And as opposed to yesterday, we have my GPU turned on. So let's go ahead and launch Mocha. I'm going to really quickly talk a little bit about OCIO color management before I jump into this. But we did add OCIO color management, which means that you can change your config files, you can change your working space, which is going to be really important for people working in a pipeline. So you can make sure that your workspace is correct across the board. This is really, really important when you're working in programs like Nuke and when you're using, when you're creating a visual effects pipeline. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Ross?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, color management has just become a much bigger issue in the last couple of years, especially as sites like Netflix and Amazon are streaming HDR material and recommending ACES workflows. So it is really important to have a solid color management workflow between your effects department and your editorial and your finishing department. And now we're pretty happy that 3 of our 4 major products have OCIO built into them. So both Mocha, Silhouette, and Sapphire all have OCIO now.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong. Well, for the people that needed it, it was a very strongly insistent request. So I think it's great that we added it.
We actually have a couple new tutorials on our website too. We have a specific OCIO video that Dan Harvey just did, so you guys could check that out on our website.
Absolutely. And that's a good time to plug all of the free training on our website, which is to say we have tons and tons and tons of free training. If you don't know how to use our tools, do not worry. We have got you. Okay, we got you, fam. Just go to our website, go to borisfx.com, go to the video tutorials section, or you can go to the training section, and we'll have the getting started series for our tools right there inside of our website.
Yeah, one thing that I think a lot of people miss too is that when you go to that training section, you can actually use the tags. So if you wanted to learn about, say, the adjust track module, or you want to learn more about the remove module, it's a way to filter out all the videos and just find what you want.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about mega plates, which I think are just a really cool tool that we've added in Mocha 2020. And what it is it allows you to, I don't know if you guys have ever done matte paintings, but my early career, I did a lot of matte paintings, and I still actually kind of do some. But the thing about matte paintings is when you create matte paintings, if you have to do large panos, to cover the background of something, how many of you guys have used Photoshop to do that and had it not match up with the lens or match up with the tracking, and then you have to like cram it back in and like warp it and try to fit it or put it on geometry or whatever. What we did is we took remove technology and our planar tracking, and we created this thing called mega plates, which connects your shot for you based on the tracking data. Now, you've been able to do stuff like this in Nuke for a while, but what you do is you have to use a node tree, you have to freeze frame, and then you move it, and then you freeze frame it again, and then you freeze frame it again, all along a stabilized tracking data, and then you blend all those together manually. This is an automated process. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our little guy here, and we're going to track him first, make sure that he's available to be held out of any tracks that we do on the ground. I didn't end up absolutely strictly having to do that, but it's going to be important later that we roto him out. What we also did is we tracked the background. You can tell I have a different track for the background than I do for the plate itself. So here is the track, and I'm going to show you a cool thing, which is link to track. So we did not track this mega plate shape. What we did is we linked it to the mega plate track. This is a really important workflow in Mocha, guys.
Yep. Whenever we talk about this, I always feel like this is the one thing. If you're going to get one thing from this training, from this session, link to track.
Yes, link to track and unlink to track, which I know is your favorite, Ross, and I'll show that also in a minute. Okay, so we'll show that for the remove. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to link that mega plate track to our track, and here's why. When you're tracking, it is not always best to track a huge shape, because the larger your shape is, the more likely that shape is to have occlusions, any sort of imperfections, fog, smoke, shadows, light changes, whatever, stuff that will mess up your track, because again, Mocha is a texture tracker and it's a computer and it does exactly what you tell it to do. So if you tell it track this whole big set of data, it's going to do that. Okay. And that data might not be the data that you need. So we're going to track this mega plate track and then link this to it. And then what we're going to do is, I've already baked this track cake for you. So just, bear with me here. I'll show you what that track looks like. Let's turn the surface tool on and let's go ahead and align it. And this is another one of those things where having those tracking improvements matters. Look at how far out that surface tool is going. And it's just perfect. Okay. All right. So we're going to take our mega plate and we are going to make a shape that covers this entire beach area. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my overlays off so this looks extra impressive. And I'm going to say, hey, Mocha, build out that plate for me so that I can paint it or whatever, And we're going to go ahead and hit Mega Plate tab, and we're going to hit Render. And you can see that Mocha is going to think about it up here. And since we're using the GPU, this is actually quite fast. And it builds out my plate for me based on my track. So here's my original plate. And then here's the shape that I defined my Mega Plate track for. Now, here's what we can also do. I don't want that guy in here because he's cramping my style. And if I need to go ahead and re-import this back into the shot, I'm going to want him out because I don't want him frozen into my plate. So we're going to click on foreground talent and we're going to say, hey, remove foreground. Excuse me. Well, are you not going to play nice today? Let's go to remove foreground. I don't know why that's not working. Let's try it again. Let's go to Mega Plate. Let's hit Render. And let's go ahead and hit remove foreground. Great. I love it when Mocha embarrasses me in front of company. We're going to show you a different Mega Plate and we'll just show you from scratch. Let's go over.
We're amongst friends.
I know, but still, it's like
just us.
That's cool. While you're searching for that clip, I think it's really cool that you can kind of build this. I call them extended plates, but the much larger frame, frame size. So you could have, if you could have an HD source, and literally depending on how much motion, you could basically get like a 2K or a 4K or larger plate out of that. And what I like about that is that then you can just paint on that one clean frame instead of having to paint multiple clean frames.
Yeah, so here's an example of that. This is a long shot. Okay. And this would be a real pain to do by hand. What we're going to do is we're going to track this background using unlink to track. So I take my shape here and you can see that it's linked to none. That means the shape is going to stay here, and look what my track does. My track moves while it reads all of the pixels that move underneath this shape like a scanner. Okay. So now I can take my background, my mega plate shape, and I can link that to the track. And what I want to make sure is that I just want to make sure that the shape covers the entire area that the car is going over. And so what we can do is let's go to like, I don't know. And let's go ahead and hit our mega plate, and let's go ahead and hit render. And what Mocha will do, again, this is much longer, so it's going to take just a little bit more time than it took previously, but even so, it's still pretty good. And it's going to build out this huge long plate for me based on my track.
So awesome. So awesome.
So
yeah,
now
it's similar to like video stitching, it's a nice way to think about it.
So now when I hit remove foreground, select my top layer and hit remove foreground, it'll remove for me. I think my old file was cached and just needed to be purged, but rather than deal with that in the demo, if you're ever having a problem, you can go over here and go to your clear cache. And this is a good tip. Go ahead and delete this entire cache. All right. And what that'll do is that will purge any sort of cache that you have that's going on in your shot. But you can see that this is a pretty good stitch. There's some errors to it, and you can see that where the car moved over and it couldn't see enough behind the car, it couldn't replace the object. But what's nice about this is I can now take this entire plate and I can paint it and fix it and do anything I want to it. I can fix the clouds and this blown out sky and adjust the mountain. And now when I put it back in my shot, it can actually reload back into my shot. So this is a really cool tool to have. I highly recommend using the Mega Plate tool. It is a lot of fun.
And combined with Silhouette Paint too, I think it's very cool because then you could be like have all this data that you've just created as clone sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And you can freeze frame that using Silhouette Paint right inside your shot. So that's a really cool trick to do. We have very little time left, so I want to touch on removes really quick. And let's talk about, here, this one. All right, so
just to answer quickly, a bunch of people wondering, Mary, like what you're using for a workstation and GPU. You are on the Dell Precision laptop with NVIDIA Quadro GPU, correct?
I am, and I'm using Wacom. I want to say it's a One tablet. It's a little secondary screen tablet. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using a Dell Precision laptop and a Wacom tablet.
Shows you what we think of the performance out of the Dell laptops that we're that we're using them for these type of presentations. So really amazing, really amazing stuff.
These laptops are portable desktops at this point.
Basically
we're at that point in the technology stream.
Beast laptops.
So let's talk a little bit about removes. Okay. Let's say I wanted to take the dog out of the shot and put in like an alien dog or something, but we needed to shoot a reference plate to put it in. So that means we got to take an object out and put like a CG object in. Okay. The thing about that is removes are actually pretty difficult to do. So if I draw a shape around my dog, for example, I could try to use a Mocha shape and I could try to use content-aware fill. And here's the thing about content-aware fill. Does really good on small to medium objects, doesn't really do great on large objects, and it doesn't really do great on super complex backgrounds that can't be 3D camera solved very well. If you can 3D camera solve a shot really well, then content-aware fill will nail it. But if you can't, and for a lot of shots you can't, then you can use something like Mocha. So I'm
terrifying, Mary. That's terrifying.
It's true. And I certainly don't want to poo-poo content-aware fill because I think it's a great tool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you a lot of choice to start making other decisions about your shot. And you're right, it is terrifying.
Like the Predator coming at me there.
A little bit predatory.
Yeah.
So if you want to, also, if you see that Predator effect and you're using the remove module inside of Mocha, you know what you've got? A bad track. Go ahead and fix your track and it'll look better. And that's like 90% of the problems when people talk about removes on the forums or whatever. They're like, what's wrong with my remove? It looks terrible. It's like, it's a bad track every time, every single time. So that's why it's important to turn that surface tool on and check what the background track is doing. All right, so if you want to do a remove on this shot, here's what's cool about this. I talked about planar tracking and how you have to track separate planes. Let's go to our selected layer. So what we've done here is we've tracked our grass. And again, look at that new tracking, just doing so good with that perspective shift. And then we track the background just like this. And again, I've already baked this tracking cake for you, but you can see that we track that background. Now, here's the thing about this background. This background is multi-planar, okay? This sort of technique will not work on every single shot that you have if your motion is not moving similarly. Because this is such a fast shot and it's such a whip pan shot, you can get away with tracking the whole background together. If this were a slower moving shot, I would need to track this house separate, this tree separate, and these top of the trees separate. Okay, so think about the motion that's happening in your shot and track that. Okay, so now what I can do is I can take my dog and I can go ahead and click on my dog and I can click on my remove module and I can just go ahead and let's come down, I don't know, somewhere around here and let's hit render so you can see over a complex background. Boom. Takes my dog right out of my scene. There's my overlays gone. You can see what it did. So we can save this and we can close it. And then back inside of After Effects, I can actually just go to check my render checkbox and remove and render it right back to my shot just like this.
Never gets old for me.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, and if you want even more control, you can separate your removes into like a grass remove and a background remove and sort of blend the line between the two. And for any other sins that are still left in the remove, because the remove module is good, but sometimes there are some things that you want to touch up, go ahead and use Silhouette Paint on a pre-comp. Just pre-compose this whole thing, move all the attributes into that composition, and then hide any of the rest of your sins with Silhouette Paint really quickly, and your shot is done. So I've been doing a lot of paint and matte painting and roto paint and rotoscoping, visual effects for my entire visual effects career. And when I started using Mocha, I doubled my workflow and I never stopped using it. And now I work for you guys. So, that's how it goes. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Very cool.
I think we covered quite a lot in the time, Mary. Always a great presentation, and I think people just get a lot out of just seeing how you use the software and kind of little aha moments keep happening for a lot of people, which is great to see.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's the nice thing about live demos, right? Because like when you do a tutorial, you're trying to cram as much information into a small piece of space as possible, and you end up missing those little details that people like to see. So even when Mocha has like a caching error like we had earlier, on a live demo, I can show you how to fix that rather than just let you sit in frustration. So I'm really happy to be able to show you stuff even when it has some tweaks.
Cool. And we definitely appreciate everyone who's tuned in to view these presentations. I think Brian has some really fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah, let's give away some prizes, right? Mary, you want to do me a favor and stop sharing your screen?
Of course I can. I'll let you be Oprah here.
Cool. I mean, to echo, both your points about the unlink track. I mean, I can't agree more. Even for me personally, like when I was learning Mocha, it took me a long time. I think Ross, you gently tried to nudge me in that direction several times, right? But Mocha's, you can jump in so easily, right? And track it incorrectly, but it works so much of the time that it took me a while to really wrap my head around unlinking. But then once you do get that watershed moment, it really was like groundbreaking. From now I realized like I can pretty much track anything and not have to deal with my mistakes.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
cool.
Once you kind of really get that sort of understand the relationship between those splines and the track data and the unlink and the ability to have multiple spline search areas and animated search areas that come in and out of the screen, and it's very, very powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually animate a shape right around the top of something if you have an occlusion walking through. You don't always have to do a holdout shape.
It's really fun for us because we're, over the years, people have always, forwarded us footage and said, I'm having such a problem with this particular track. And, for us to either just improve the tool based on these different challenges or just kind of share different ways to think about it, it's usually you can solve almost any kind of shot.
Yep. I remember it was JP at an NAB just one time just was like, why are you doing it like that? I was like, maybe you could show me how to do it.
Yeah, it is to the power of the software that a lot of people can go in there and just without even ever reading a manual and just kind of draw a shape and hit track and they're like, wow, it follows. But once the more you use it, it becomes, for me or Mary, it becomes that tool in your toolkit that you just always reach for.
Yeah. Actually one of my favorite things to do is when we still, when we were doing on-sites before everybody got locked down, I'm in Los Angeles, so I go around to studios all over Los Angeles and I'll troubleshoot. And I always have like every single demo. There's always some artist that comes up like after the demo is like, so I have this one shot. Can you come look at it? And I go look at it, and sometimes I can just solve it in like 15 or 20 minutes. And that usually is mind blowing, and it's so fun to do. It like gives you like, you're like, I'm so glad I could help, it just feels really good to be able to do that.
Okay, let's give away some prizes. So first off, we're gonna give away a $1,500 gift certificate to an FMC online class. It's Future Media Concepts. They do amazing training for all post-production applications like After Effects or Premiere, or pretty much anything nowadays. Kez FX wins that. Watching on YouTube, that is KEZFX. Kez FX, congratulations, wins that gift certificate to FMC Online. Watching on YouTube. Staying with the effects team, Space Effects, watching on YouTube. Space Effects wins a license for Vegas Pro. Congratulations, Space Effects. Jimmy Gilbert. Oh, sorry, I totally horribly butchered that. Jimmy Gilberti. That is GILIBERTI, watching on Facebook, wins a 1-year subscription to Avid Media Composer. Congratulations, Jimmy Gilberti. Rob Hendricks, watching on Facebook. Rob wins the Boris Effects bundle, which is Sapphire Continuum and Mocha Pro, a 1-year subscription.
Nice one.
Congratulations to Rob. James Westlake, watching on Facebook. James, you won a 1-year subscription to the full Silhouette. Congratulations to James. Get Silhouette for 1 year. And on Twitter, Marie0520, I'm going to spell this. That is at MARIEEE0520. Watching on Twitter, wins a 1-year subscription to Silhouette Paint. So congratulations. Tom Schollard, watching on YouTube, wins Isotope RX7, amazing audio plugins. I use these all the time. So Isotope RX7, great for denoising. Tom Schollard wins on YouTube. And at J Stevens 85, Jason Stevens, watching on Twitter, you were the Coral Melt Chromatic plus Paint X bundle for FCPX. So congratulations to J Stevens 85. Congratulations to all the winners. And thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Mary for an amazing presentation. I always learn something every time we watch. So thank you so much. Great job. And thank you, Ross, too. So we are going to be back at 3 o'clock with Ben Brownlee looking at Sapphire 2020.5. He's going to be deep diving Sapphire lens flares. And I'm sure talking about the integrated Mocha Pro positional tracking within lens flares. So come back and join us at 3 o'clock. We'll be giving away some other awesome prizes like a $200 gift certificate to Action VFX, another seat of Vegas Pro, a subscription to Avid Media Composer, Core Melt Paint X, and the Boris Effects bundle, the Silhouette 1-year subscription, Silhouette Paint 1-year subscription. So come back and see us at 3 o'clock. Once again, everything we sell is on sale right now. Multi-product bundles are on sale for 50% off, and all single products are 25% off. So if you want to upgrade to Mocha Pro, we want to upgrade to the latest version, and right now is the time to do it with 25% off. All the winners, please be patient with us. We'll try and reach out to you through whatever social platform you watched on, but probably give us till about Friday to kind of track everyone down. But we will find you and give you your prizes. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks again, Mary. Amazing presentation. And thank you, Ross. And we'll see everybody at 3 o'clock.
Thanks
All
for
right,
joining,
thanks for having us.
everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
See you later.